don't forget to click the like and subscribe buttons if you enjoyed this video about She had no clue her dog was a hero until she found a note on his collar. Louis grew up among New Zealand's nature, surrounded by wildlife, birds, and the unique flora found in those fertile soils. Ever since he was a little pup, Louis would run around the farmland, herding sheep and venturing out and exploring on his own. Some days, he wouldn't come back until late at night, but he always made sure to be back around dinner time. One day, Louis's owners hadn't heard from Louis for a while, so they started to get worried. As Louis got older, his escapades around the farmland were few and far between. The pup was now 13 years old, and he had slowly grown less adventurous due to his age. He still made sure to do a few runs across the farm, but he was more interested in lying on the grass while he relaxed under the sun. But he took everyone by surprise one afternoon when he decided to venture out and leave, which raised some red flags. Marilyn, who was Louis's human mom, was a bit taken aback. "It's been years since she's seen him move that fast. What's gotten into him?" she said to herself. As soon as he crossed the farm's border, Louis vanished from everyone's sight. What could have caught Louis's attention so suddenly? The day went by, and Louis wasn't returning home. Marilyn's growing concern was starting to escalate. Where was he? It was a beautiful summer afternoon at Marilyn's farmland. They were surrounded by nature and wildlife, so it wasn't uncommon to see mice, foxes, and hares running around the land. Back when Louis was a vibrant and energetic puppy, he used to disappear for hours, chasing after critters, digging under the bramble. Now she was starting to wonder, had he lost his way, chasing after something? Louis was no longer the vigorous, lively puppy that used to go on adventures every day. It seemed a little far-fetched to believe the 13-year-old dog would suddenly feel like wandering off when he hadn't done it in years. He loved nothing more than to lounge under the sun. All he needed was his porch and some food by his side. There was something off about Louis's disappearance, for sure. What Marilyn didn't know is that Louis wasn't alone. There had been other pups who had gone missing that day, too. Her neighbor, Rob, who lived just down the street, realized his little terrier, Maddie, was nowhere to be seen. He started feeling a knot in his stomach when he noticed Maddie hadn't come back, which was really unusual for her, as she usually left for an hour or so. What could have happened to these two missing pups? The sun began to set, and there was still no sign of Louis. Marilyn took a quick peek outside, hoping she'd see her beloved pup running back to her arms. She rattled Louis's food bowl, hoping he'd hear it and come out from wherever he was hiding, if he was hiding at all. She let out a sigh, left the bowl there, and got back inside the house. Marilyn was now thinking of every potential scenario that could explain Louis's disappearance. As the night went on, Marilyn started imagining the worst possible scenarios in her mind. She knew that older dogs had a tendency to wander off and find a private spot where they could spend their final moments alone. What if Louis had sensed his time had come? What if he never? She kept wondering, until she heard a scratch by the door. Was that Louis? Louis was standing outside of the sliding glass door, exhausted and covered in mud. He was covered by a blanket of twigs, too. His paws and belly were also muddy as heck. Did he go after some creature and forgot how to find his way home? Why would this take him so long? She opened the door, but Louis was exhausted. He walked slowly towards his bed and almost passed out. Marilyn was relieved and excited to see her beloved pup again safe at home. But her happiness quickly turned to concern as she started checking Louis for injuries. She noticed a few scratches here and there, but there was one thing that caught her attention. There was a cardboard note attached to Louis's collar. "Lou is the hero of the day. He led me to Maddie in distress, stuck under a branch pile. Cheers, Rob." Marilyn was both thrilled and proud to discover her dog was nothing short of a hero that day. It all made sense now. Dogs can sense when there's trouble, so he must have realized that little Maddie was in trouble that day. Her owner, Rob, had been looking for her since the early morning, but he had to stop for a bit to run a few errands. When he got back home, Maddie was nowhere to be found, still, until he saw little old Louie. Despite being an older dog, Louie's senses seemed to be intact. He was particularly persistent that day, and in a way, you could say he was like a dog with a bone. He was very loud that day, barking and bounding in an alarming way. At first, Rob couldn't understand why he was acting this way, until he realized what he was doing. That's when he got closer to Louie, who immediately led the way towards Maddie. As Louie made his way through the woods, he kept constantly growling, barking, and making sure Rob was following him. They made their way towards the edge of the farm. They went pretty far until they stumbled upon a clearing. That's when he saw the giant pile of wood on one side. Louie started sniffing the branches under the pile of wood, and that's when they heard a faint moan coming from inside. Rob screamed, "Maddie!" The second the tiny pup heard her owner's voice, she let out a desperate cry for help. "We've got you," he said, in an attempt to calm her down. "It'll all be all right," he kept on saying, but he couldn't have made it without Louie. He started digging ferociously in the dried dirt. Rob kept pulling branches and logs, trying to keep them from coming loose. After Louie's desperate digging and Rob's attempt at holding together the dangerous pile of wood, little Maddie's beard popped up from the hole. She was okay. It took Rob the longest time to finally be able to lift the giant pile of wood so Maddie could get out, but she was able to crawl her way out. She looked disheveled, hungry, and scared, but she was finally free. Louie wanted to make sure that his friend would get home safe, so he followed back to Rob's house. Of course, the man was beyond grateful that old Louie persevered and did everything he could to get his attention and lead him towards Maddie. So he prepared an extra bowl of food. He drafted a note and attached it to his collar so Marilyn would know what happened. Then it was time for Louie to go home. The next day, Marilyn went out on a walk along with Louie, thrilled that he had made his way home. They were making their way towards Rob's house. Little Maddie greeted Louie, and the two trotted around and played a little, while their owners talked about what went down that day. Rob went on to describe the whole situation in great detail. Marilyn was shocked, to say the least. To say that Louie saved the day is an understatement. He had protected the farm for over a decade, so he was pretty familiar with the area. If it wouldn't have been for his heightened senses, Maddie may have never been found. Louie's heroic act is further proof that dogs are truly man's best friend. Attaboy, Louie!